we have a common topic, cognitive insights into chess improvement, but I'm not sure the title really is perfect for all of the speakers. So heading is maybe a little bit outside of that, but it doesn't matter. It's a very interesting subject that he's going to talk about too. First speaker, I think we are starting with you, Dave. I think you graduated not so long ago from University of
Bristol. I'll give a bit of background. So I graduated in 2008 with a bachelor's in computer science with honors in New York. And then the last year I spent kind of broadening my horizons by trying to understand a bit more about the social sciences. So I did a master's in psychology of education at the University of Bristol. I've just finished that, and fortunately I could apply all my reading and all my coursework to expertise, expert performance, learning, and chess. So I've been pretty recently refreshed on all the academic papers on that.
When is it still about introduction? Have you been connected? Well, because expertise, cognitive psychology, chess, that's of course the domain of Fernand Gobet. Have you studied with him at some point?
Domain of who, sorry?
Fernand Gobet, professor at the University of Liverpool, who was supposed to be here in this in the conference as one of the keynote speakers, and also possibly in this session.
So the work I've been reading is mainly Ericsson.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So thanks for being here and sharing now with us your ideas.
Okay. So before I tell you about the theory that Chessable uses in the science we use, I'd like to talk to you about the 10,000-hour rule, which is by a scientist called Ericsson. This question, some say, well, they're talented, they're natural at this, they're born for it, and we stop asking that question. But what they try to draw attention to is that actually it's not just about putting in the practice hours or the study hours, it's about how you study. And they noticed that one particular kind of study was happening across people, and they called it serious study alone. So they didn't want you to be distracted by other people, by a classroom, by a coach. The most productive hours, they said, was when you study on your own. So because I have this big interest on how you study, when I started learning chess about 3 years ago, I noticed that when I was reading a chess book, I would read it and I wouldn't remember, and I was saying that in my previous presentation, or I watched a video once, twice, and I wouldn't remember it. So I was very interested in, maybe how I study can be improved. So when we built Chessable, we had that in mind, and I'm not sure if many of you here are scientists, but I'll kind of try and give an overview of the science we use and why we use it. And one of the very first things that we use, and one of the main things, is spaced repetition or scheduling. And this was a system that a German scientist developed, actually, I think in the 19th century. His name was Ebbinghaus. And he shows with experimental psychology, experiment after experiment, that the best way to remember something is to space the time between repetitions. So don't look at something once a day. So if you get it right, maybe first day, then after 2 days, then after 5 days, then after a week, a month, and so on, space it. And he convincingly shows that this is one of the best ways to remember. So with Chessable, we integrate this. We keep track of the contents of a book or a video, and then the things you get right, we space for a later time. The things you get wrong, we ask you to review it sooner. The second thing that we try and do is in neuroscience, the latest research suggests that dopamine, the neurotransmitter dopamine, chemical in our brain, is very important for learning. If you can get dopamine to release in your brain when you're trying to learn something, that memory should be formed stronger and remembered better than if there was no dopamine. So, the lesson from that, we need dopamine to be released in our brain. And how does that happen? That happens when you make things fun, you make them interesting, you make them rewarding. There are other ways to release dopamine in the brain, some more artificial than others, so we're not going to go into that. But one of the reasons about gamification is so big is because gamification releases dopamine in the brain. So when you're learning, you get a hit of dopamine and you will remember things better, hopefully. The next thing that Chessable implements is testing. And I know that testing is seen sometimes in a negative light because often it creates a culture about performance. I need to pass this test, I need to do well on my test. That creates anxiety, that creates problems. But it doesn't have to be that way. Testing can actually also be beneficial for learning. And the way you have to do testing so that it's beneficial is to give immediate and clear feedback, and also to not make it about passing the test, but rather just you're testing yourself without any pressure, right? So with Chessable, what we do is once you've learned the things that the book is trying to teach you or the video is trying to teach you, we quiz you. And if you get things wrong, we show you the right answer. And you can repeat it and do it right again. Obviously, we space it, but also you can save the position. You can ask a question. And I was mentioning actually the book authors often go and answer that question for you. So you're like, why is this move good here? I'm playing this, it should be good as well. The author, the international chess master or the grandmaster will give you a detailed explanation of the plans, of the ideas behind it, and you remember better. So in this light, testing and quizzing should be seen in a positive light. One of the next principles that we try and integrate into our software is that concept of implicit learning or imitation. And this is something humans are actually very good at. And ever since we're babies, we're imitating and we're learning implicitly. And neuroscientists have actually shown that in our brain, we have special neurons that they like to call mirror neurons, which activate. I'm sorry if you're not following, you can stop me and ask a question because I'm not sure how detailed I should get into that. But these neurons activate, they fire when we watch somebody performing an action, right? So we don't even have to be doing the action, we're just watching somebody and our neurons are firing. And actually the process of learning and remembering is all about neurons firing. So what does it say? This says that we can actually learn just by watching and by imitating. In a traditional book, you'll be reading, maybe you'll be trying to construct a position in your mind, maybe you just look at the little diagrams they provide you. But in Chessable, we show it to you move by move. So first, you're watching the moves happening on the board, then obviously you're getting quizzed, and everything is adding up together to give you a good learning experience. One of the last things I want to talk about in terms of science inside of Chessable is avoiding labor in vain. In educational psychology, there is this concept of laboring in vain, and what does it mean? It's basically kind of obvious about our terminology, but a lot of us will get stuck in a goal and say, this is going to be great for my chess, this is going to be great for my language learning, and we're going to continue studying the same thing over and over again without actually seeing if it's good for us. Are we improving? In terms of studying an opening book, for example, you might read a whole book and then say, I need a refresher, I need to do this again. You might read a whole book again, but you're laboring in vain because maybe you only need to review 10% of the material. Maybe you need to focus your attention in the parts that need the work and not everything at the same time. So with Chessable, we make sure that you don't labor in vain. One of the benefits of having studied a master's degree a bit later in life, I was classified as a mature student actually. I don't think I'm that mature yet, but yeah, 25 and up, you consider old. So the benefit is you can really target what you're studying to your professional interests. So even though I've just talked about 5 scientific concepts we're trying to integrate into our tools, there are many, many more things of which I've taken note that could potentially apply to learning chess and improving our learning even more. And I'm very excited to hopefully soon build them and bring them to everyone. For example, one idea going forward in neuroscience is being suggested that when you reward people for doing something, it is better if the reward is uncertain. So if you're not sure what you're going to get, sometimes you get a reward, sometimes you don't get a reward. Apparently that's better for learning than if you always get rewarded. So this is something we're going to implement into Chessable. We're going to make a few adjustments, and we're going to try uncertain reward. That's just one idea.
Can you explain why that is? Why would an uncertain reward be preferable?
Well, you have to look at the neuroscientist papers in detail to explain why, but what I can tell you is that if you are getting it the same reward every time, you know what to expect, right? So you're not building up that excitement of, oh, what am I going to get? So what I've done is they've tracked with EEG devices. When they monitor your brain activity, they've seen that when you don't know what you're going to get, you get an extra hit of dopamine. So it kind of the levels off slowly. And I don't have the details on that, but I'm sure you can look it up. And it's just basically you have more neurotransmitter activity in your brain. So that's one direction going forward that's exciting. There are many more notes that I have, and I hope to do the same as we've done with the chess books. First, we release to a small number of people. We test it out. If people like it and it's helping their learning, we scale it up. That's what we've done with chess books. And particularly relevant to this conference, we have Dr. Barry Himmer here talking about Carol Dweck's work. And it's actually a coincidence that my dissertation involved Carol Dweck, Ericsson, and chess. So he's talking about a theory. I've actually already gone and applied it. I've conducted research to see, does this growth mindset and fixed mindset theory actually apply to chess players? And I talked to him about it yesterday. So I'm not sure, is everybody familiar here with the growth and fixed mindsets? Do I have to go over it again? Okay, great. So he was talking about growth and fixed mindsets as related to chess ability. And when I went to the research setting, which was a chess tournament here in London, actually it turns out most chess players have a growth mindset for chess ability. You ask anybody, and most people will say, yes, chess ability can be improved. It's malleable. You know, everybody can improve as long as you put the work in. And it's great. And I told Dr. Himmer yesterday, have you considered testing fixed and growth mindsets of intelligence for chess players? Because many of us see chess as a game of intelligence. And maybe that has something to do with how we learn chess. So I also looked at that. And what happened actually was quite interesting. People who displayed a fixed mindset of intelligence, they were less likely to put serious study hours of practice. So they would avoid doing that. And by Erickson's theory of expertise that says serious study is one of the most important things you can do, they were harming their efforts at improving because they believed that intelligence had a limit. This can be talked about in a lot more detail, but also interestingly is that if you believed that chess ability is fixed, that it's a natural, maybe gene-determined skill, what would happen is you would play less serious chess tournament games, less over-the-board games. And I'm talking about correlations here, just so everybody understands. This is just the initial kind of groundwork to see what's going on. And what this suggests is that people who think chess ability is fixed, is predetermined, it has some level, they just avoid playing serious games. And if any of you are here serious chess players, you might know that playing a serious over-the-board game is one of the sure ways to improve. And that's why looking into the science and considering all this research, I think is very important to me, and I think it should be important in other companies that are trying to improve learning chess, because we might be able to find these insights that lead to interventions or to tools that can improve all of our learning. That's my presentation, and I welcome your questions. I mean, that's definitely one of the challenges we encountered. Some people look at us and say, oh, repetition, boring, we don't want to have a look at it. But that's why it's not just repetition, it's spaced repetition. So if you've learned something well, you're not going to see it again for 2 months or 3 months, depending how much we space it.
Yeah, but the same exercise, that's the question.
Right.
I understand what you say about intervals.
Yeah,
but should it be the same exercise?
Well, if you...
For example, a pin or a double attack. Should it be exactly the same double attack, or should it be another double attack?
I think there is a benefit of having the same one, because if you learned it well, you're not going to see it again, right? The more you space it, we could take the spacing to 1 year, right? It would say, if you get it right 15 times, you don't see the same exercise for a year. Well, then you have your variation, because you will start seeing other exercises, right?
Yeah.
You see what I mean? So it can work together, I think. Variation.
Yeah, but that maybe you have done some research about it, because it can be of interest.
Mm-hmm. No, I don't know any research that includes variations. I'm not aware of it. Variation.
Yeah, but that maybe there, you have done some research about it because it can be of interest.
No, I don't know any research that includes variations. I'm not aware of it.
It was just a comment. There's a lot of research about retrieval being one of the best ways of learning, right? So if you see exactly the same position and have to solve it, you will try to retrieve what you learned previously, and maybe you will not even notice that you've seen this before because it's 2-3 months later. So it's the part of trying to retrieve what you already learned that actually gives a lot of success to it.
Points, we give out badges, and we try to make it fun because yeah, some people might find it boring. So you need to kind of balance it out, right?
Yeah, but it's also a point. You said sometimes I know about these motivation theories, and Stefan asked about it because it's counterintuitive. That sometimes you have a big reward, sometimes less, and then you said explanation is something about dopamine. Yeah, but okay, there could also be another discussion: extrinsic and intrinsic motivation.
Yeah.
If they think, well, this is not for my rating, but this is because I just love the. If you learn them another mindset, that could involve.
I agree with you, but the question is, as a pragmatist, how do we apply that? Obviously, in a classroom, you know your students, and you can start analyzing intrinsic motivation, extrinsic motivation. Maybe you can do some work with it. But with an online learning system, how am I going to change their motivation, right? Approach to what we're trying to do. I mean, I'm not trying to start changing people's mindsets right now, but right now I'm trying to help people remember contents of books and remember contents of video lessons. So that is my main goal right now. But obviously, you could expand and start doing things like that.